Josh could be returned to the NASCAR Cup Series as early as 2027, and Tabloid is no longer listed as a spotter for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting this weekend at Pocono. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at the purse money for this weekend at Pocono. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $11,055,250. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. And for the truck race, it's $782,900. Obviously, for the Truck Series, it's the lowest purse money of the weekend, like it always is. Cup has some pretty good money, unlike last week where they had $12 million, $11 million is still a pretty good number, all things considered. And for Xfinity, it's kind of generally about where it is every single year. Nonetheless, I do think the purse money for this weekend is solid, at least on the Cup and Xfinity side, but the Truck Series purse money could definitely be a little bit better. Nonetheless, pretty big stuff for sure, and at least the Cup Series has some good purse money for this weekend at Pocono. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. As it has been announced that the Los Angeles Lakers have been sold to Mark Walter. Now, why is this significant? Well, Mark Walter is part of TWG Global. TWG Global has association with Dan Towers, who of course owns Spire Motorsports, Andretti Global, and also is a part owner of the new Cadillac program that's going to be coming in 2026 in Formula One. This is a major deal because now technically LeBron James, who might be a part owner of RFK Racing, is now playing for a team under the Spire Motorsports umbrella in some way, shape, or form. This could also potentially lead to possibilities of some Los Angeles Lakers sponsorships coming down the road for the Spire Motorsports team and organization, as now with the Lakers being associated with TWG Global. This is a really big deal, and LA Dodgers also do have association with that as well, so maybe some Los Angeles Dodgers stuff could come for Spire Motorsports as well down the road. Nonetheless, I think this is a really huge deal for sure. The TWG Global has bought up the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think they're continuing to grow their portfolio. They've got a lot of endless money, endless cash, and they continue not only just to expand their presence in the motorsports world, but they also continue to expand their presence in other types of worlds as well. Pretty exciting stuff to see that they're coming in and buying up the Los Angeles Lakers. Pretty cool stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, last night, Kyle Larson competed in the World of Outlaws race at Husets for day number 1. He unfortunately was not able to win the second night. Buddy Kofoid was the guy who went to victory lane. But on night number 1, Kyle Larson started up inside the top 5, got the lead late in the event, and came off the corner and picked up another World of Outlaws victory at Husets Speedway. This is Kyle Larson's 39th career win at World of Outlaws. The next win, he will become the 22nd driver in World of Outlaws history to reach 40 wins all time in the World of Outlaws. I think Kyle Larson, by the end of his racing career, will probably have over 100 wins in the World of Outlaws, which not a lot of drivers in history of that series have gone on to win over 100 races in the events. Congratulations to Kyle Larson putting it up. Larson has struggled the last couple dirt races he's entered, so it's big to see Larson go out there and win. Picking up a win like this is a really huge deal. It's going to be a really big confidence booster for Kyle Larson, and I think it will lead to him having a great chance and a strong opportunity to go out there and maybe win the Cup Series race at Pocono. He's going to be a big factor for that win, and I think he'll have a great chance and opportunity to get that win in victory this weekend at Pocono in the NASCAR Cup Series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Taylor Reimer. As it was announced yesterday that Taylor Reimer will drive the number 70 for Nitro Motorsports this Saturday at Elko Speedway. This is going to be her first ever pavement start in ARCA competition. Taylor Reimer, of course, has made a lot of starts in ARCA. She's had some success in the ARCA series on the dirt tracks, and she's had some top 5 and even top 2 or top 3 finishes in the main ARCA series. This is going to be a really big test for her. She did some testing in Michigan, if I remember correctly, during one of the practice sessions for Venturini, which of course Venturini is being absorbed by Nitro Motorsports going into next year. This is going to be a really good opportunity, but she's going to have some high expectations because remember last week, Trey Lasovich drove the number 70 car and he went on to pick up the win in victory. I think they're trying to audition drivers and get them prepared for 2026 because they're not sure what the lineup is officially going to be for next year. I'd have to think Lawless Allen will be involved in that lineup in some way, shape, or form with the experience he does have. Nonetheless, really exciting stuff to see that she's getting an opportunity here. I think she is going to be pretty competitive, and I think especially with the speed that they showed when they were out there, I think she's going to have a great chance and opportunity being up front. I think she'll have a solid opportunity. I think she minimum gets top 5, but I think she could have an outside chance of picking up the win, though I do think Brendan Quinn is going to have a great chance to pick up the win as well this weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about James Vowels. As it was announced earlier today that James Vowels has officially signed a contract extension with Williams. And according to the announcement, it is a long-term contract. James Vowels for many years worked at Mercedes, helped that team grow into one of the most successful organizations in Formula One history. And over the last couple of years since 2023, he has been with the Williams organization. James Vowels has helped that organization and transition that organization to be one of the fastest teams in Formula One, or one of the teams that's gone from being the slowest team of Formula One to now being kind of in the middle of the pack and at times getting points. And we've seen Carlos Sainz have some success this year, and we've also seen their other driver, Alex Albon, be really, really good as well this year. And a big part of that has been James Vowels coming in and really helping that program grow into a successful team. I think in the next 5 and 10 years, it would not shock me and surprise me, especially with new regulations coming in. I would not be surprised if Williams kind of get back to where in the 80s and 90s and could be a championship contending team. I think James Vowels is a big part of that. So nonetheless, great opportunity for James to continue working with this team. I think he's done a fantastic job, and I think he's going to continue doing a great job with this team long term and going forward in the not-so-distant future. It's a great decision to keep him around, and I think he'll do a great job with this team going forward in a long-term and foreseeable future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. Now, earlier today, they began setting up the build for the Chicago Street Course for the third and potential final year of the Chicago Street Course event that might take place. Obviously, they've been speeding up the process. The first year, I think it took like 2 or 3 months to get the track officially set up. Last year, they started doing it in early June, and now in the middle to late June, they officially are setting up the event for this year. The reason they're doing it a lot quicker is, one, they have a couple years of prior experience now at this point, but number two, they know what they're setting up, and of course, there's not as much around the event this year for 2025 compared to the prior 2 years. You've only got one big major artist that's going to be out there this year for the concert, and that is going to be Zac Brown Band. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation right now that this, of course, is going to be the final year of the Chicago Street Course. And I think this could be the last year, considering there are a ton of rumors and a ton of rumors that Chicagoland may be back on the NASCAR schedule for 2026. And we know that the city's not as much of a fan of this event. There's a lot of people in the city that don't want this track to stick around next year. And there are rumors that San Diego might be the replacement for the street course side of things. So San Diego won't replace the Chicago Street Course day. It will just be kind of taking that Mexico City day going into next year. I think in general this is a pretty big deal that they're getting this set up a lot quicker than they used to back in the day, and I think in general it is going to be a pretty fun and solid event, all things considered. I think it'll be really good. I think the first 2 years, despite the rain issues, the racing has been generally really, really good, and I think we'll see some fun and really exciting racing at the track. In my honest opinion, hope it could be good. This could, like I said though, be the final year for the Chicago Street Course on the schedule. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about ThorSport Racing. As it was announced earlier this afternoon that ThorSport Racing has once again, for what seems like the third or fourth year in a row, they have once again swapped crew chiefs in the middle of the season. So Rich Lucius, who's been the crew chief for Ben Rhodes throughout the whole entire season and the end of last year, he'll be the crew chief for the number 66 car that Luke Baldwin is going to drive this weekend. While Doug George, who's been the crew chief for the number 66 car all season long, he'll move over to start working with Ben Rhodes starting later today in the Truck Series race at Pocono Raceway. This is now the third consecutive season where we have seen the crew chief for Ben Rhodes, that being Rich Lucius, move to another team or come from another team, because back in 2023, Haley Deegan started off season with Rich Lucius, and then Rich Lucius near the middle of the year went to work with Ben Rhodes, and Ben Rhodes went on to win the championship later that year. Then we saw a swap last year in the middle of the year, and now we're seeing it once again. ThorSport Racing is a team that's trying to make moves at this point to try to get this team better, because ThorSport Racing, let's be real and honest, they have not been really that good this season so far. It has been an awful season for ThorSport Racing when you do look at the general performance of the team and organization. They are having their worst season they've had in many, many years. They, of course, have struggled to keep up. Ty Majeski is right now the only ThorSport Racing driver who's in the playoffs, and let's be real and honest, he has not been the fastest driver at the team. I just think if you were going to make a change to try to make your program better, better. I would have swapped Joe Shear Jr. with Rich Lucius, put Rich with Ty Majeski, and then put Joe Shear Jr. with Ben Rose and trying to change it up there. If you want to take it more seriously, I don't think moving the crew chief that's won the championships for 2 of the last 3 years or 2 of the last 5 years, I wouldn't want to move him over and work with the team that's not even really competing for a championship at this point. I think that's a really questionable move if you ask me. Nonetheless, I'm interested to see how things work out going forward, but I think it's going to be a struggle for ThorSport as a team continues to struggle to run up front. They haven't been good. They're going to have Cam Waters next week, which is exciting, and which I think will be good for Rich, and hopefully that leads to some success. But I do think this move is questionable in some ways, shape, or form, and I think making this move as late as they are is a little bit questionable, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course once again. As it was reported by Bob Pockers from Fox Sports on yesterday that there will be doing electric vehicles around the racetrack once again in 2025. But for the first time ever, they're not only going to have 1 electric vehicle on the track, but they're going to have 3 electric vehicles on the track representing each manufacturer for Ford, Chevrolet, and Toyota. So the Ford driver is going to be David Reagan, the Chevy driver is going to be Raja Karuf, and the Toyota driver is going to be Brent Cruz. They're going to have like some sort of exhibition race, it seems like, for 20 laps, and they're going to put on a little bit of show before the NASCAR Cup Series race takes place. This, like I said, is the first time that we've seen multiple of these electric cars on the racetrack at the same time. When they've done these demonstrations out for the fans that do show up to the track a little bit early, they only tend to have 1 car out there. But like I said, for the first time, they're going to have 3 cars out on the track. Obviously, there is some speculation down the road that they maybe could have some sort of electric series, and the closer we do get to like the end of the decade, the more likely I think it's going to be possible. Now, keep in mind, if they do bring some sort of electric series into the track, it's not going to be replacing one of the existing series. It's not going to replace ARCA, though ARCA, I think, needs some big changes to that series at this point to get the competition a little bit higher. They're not going to replace trucks. They're not going to replace an Xfinity or Cup. They are talking about adding some sort of electrical component to the cars. They're probably not going to replace the series in any way, shape, or form with a new electric series. But NASCAR is keeping their eyes open because we don't even know what the certainty of the future of electric cars are going to be. I mean, we've got Dodge who's bringing back the Hemi at this point, and other companies are backing away from doing a lot of their stuff in regards to the electrification, among other things. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much uncertainty in regards to the car industry. Things can change within a fly, and things can change within a second. There's a lot of uncertainty on that. I mean, you're talking about adding hybrids, a hybrid system to the Cup Series cars, especially if Honda does come in. There could be some sort of hybrid system, which is an electric component to the cars. I am very interested to see if maybe we do get some sort of electric series. I don't think people really love the electric side of things, but I think there is some sense for maybe down the road having an electric series. But then again, I think it's going to be at least a few years before that happens. I think the earliest will be like the end of the decade when I'm like 30 years old or in my mid-30s. We'll see what happens in the future, but I think it's interesting. They're going to have demonstrations of multiple cars out on the track in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Days of Thunder 2. As it was officially confirmed by Jerry Bruckheimer, who developed the first Days of Thunder movie and helped develop the most recent Top Gun Maverick, he has confirmed in a recent interview that Days of Thunder 2 is officially in the works and they're beginning to work on the new concept for Days of Thunder. The original Days of Thunder came out 35 years ago in 1990. It has been almost 4 decades since the last time we had a Days of Thunder movie. And what a lot of people, including myself, have been clamoring for is a sequel to Days of Thunder like we got with Top Gun and then Top Gun Maverick, of course. I think this is a really, really huge deal that we have got confirmation on this, especially with the F1 movie coming out. I've not seen the F1 movie at this point, but from what some people are saying, it is a really, really solid movie. Others have said the movie may not be as good. But I think Days of Thunder is a huge deal. And Tom Cruise told Jeff Gordon at the most recent premiere of Mission Impossible Day of Reckoning, the Final Reckoning, he confirmed that they are wanting to make that movie happen and they're working on that at this particular moment and point. I think Days of Thunder, regardless of when it does end up getting released and comes out, which I think there's a chance that they're working on it right now, the earliest we probably will get Days of Thunder 2 will be like in 2027 or 2028. Tom Cruise is going to be around 65 or 66 years old when that movie does release. I believe Tom Cruise will turn 63 at the end of this year, so he's going to be in his mid to upper 60s once this movie releases. So then you're going to have to look for a younger driver. I think it could be very similar to where the old school people like Tom Cruise was could go to more of the new school people like they had in the movie. And I think when you think about Top Gun Maverick, I think that is one of the best movies we have seen and one of the best sequels we have seen for movies in a very, very long time. And I think that if Days of Thunder can be like Mission Impossible 2 was, not Mission Impossible, Top Gun Maverick was, I think this could be a really, really good movie. I don't know what the plot would be like. I'd have to think it'd be kind of similar, maybe like a Mark Martin story, for instance, where Mark Martin came in out of retirement from full-time and then came back to be a full-time driver in 2009, almost won the championship that year. Maybe he does with something like Brad Pitt did in the movie of F1. That's something they could do for sure. But I think it's a huge deal with Days of Thunder because I think Days of Thunder is one of the best racing movies of all time, and I think it is really exciting to see, nonetheless, that it looks like we're going to be getting officially a sequel for the Days of Thunder movies. I think that's something to watch out for. I think it's really exciting for sure, and I really hope when it does come out, it's very successful. I think it could be a very successful event, and I hope we do get to see a very successful movie of Days of Thunder because I want to see a sequel for. I think it will be a very, very huge deal in a nutshell and in general. When it does officially get released, it's exciting, and it's really, really good to see that there's a Days of Thunder is finally likely in the works. I'm very excited to see what actors they get, what new school actors they can get. I think it'll be interesting to find out which people they're going to get and what things and maybe drivers they'll use in the Cup Series and what kind of filming they'll do like they did in 1990 when they started working on the film for the original one. Interesting to see how that plays out, and we'll be paying attention to that as time progresses and goes on. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mark Martin. Now, Mark Martin was most recently on the Kenny Wallace podcast, and I listened to quite a bit of this podcast earlier today, and a lot of things that Mark Martin said, I will say I do agree with. And Mark Martin kind of talked about the fact that he is not a big fan of the playoff format, which is not shocking and surprising considering he's been super critical of it. And he also feels like the championships and the success that he's had in NASCAR, he feels like that the accomplishments that he's had in motorsports and NASCAR especially, he feels like they're being wasted and taken away because of what we've seen in NASCAR in recent years. NASCAR, of course, has had a playoff format in some way, shape, or form since 2004. NASCAR's had a win-in-your-in system for now 11 years, and Mark Martin by that time was retired. But we're starting to see a lot of people who've been retired for a very, very long time starting to come out and speak their opinions on this playoff format and NASCAR's championship format. And honestly, and he talked about like the fans that have been around for a very long time being very critical of it, but there's a lot of younger fans, even for that matter, who are kind of my age, for example, or maybe even a little younger, who've been very, very critical of NASCAR's championship format. And a lot of it's been stemming from the fact that Shane Van Gisbergen, who was 30th in the regular season standings after getting the win, he's locked into the playoffs now because he picked up that win at Mexico. Now, by the end of the regular season, I do think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be higher than 30th. I think he's got a chance at a top 10 this weekend at Pocono, considering how well he ran in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at this track before getting taken out at the end of the race. I do think Mark Martin's on point, though. I think I'd rather have a full season championship format. I think that would be the best format to determine a champion in NASCAR, because right now, having a one-race championship to determine a champion, having 4 drivers compete for that, I don't think that's the fairest way to determine a champion. He talked about the fact that Joey Logano, who was 20th in the regular season standings, was able to make the playoffs. That should tell you everything you need to know, and go on and win a championship. And Mark is right. There's no reason that Joey Logano, who had like a 16th place average finish, or 15.8 or something like that average finish, should have been able to win the championship after having like maybe 8 or 9 top 10s all season. Logano's generally been better this year in particular than he was even last year. And I think that for Mark Martin, he's on point. I know they have a cancel. It sounds like they're going to have a final round championship. Winning your inning is not going away from it, sounds like, which honestly, there's a few things that the criteria I'd like to see change. Winning your in has to go away, in my opinion. I think that absolutely needs to go. And I think a one-race championship, if we're going to have some sort of postseason, needs to go. In fact, I think that there should be 10 races instead of just even 2 or 3. Because I don't think 3 races is enough of a sample size. If it's like 5 or 6 races, then that's a little bit more like thing I'd see, but no one should be able to lock their way in based on wins or anything like that. I think the championship format absolutely needs to have some major adjustments going forward. I don't think it's the best way to determine a champion the way they're doing the format at this point. In fact, guys like Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, all those were some of the best guys last year, and 3 of those guys didn't even make the championship 4, despite the fact they were 3 of the fastest guys all year, and they had nothing to show for it because of the system we have currently at the moment. So I think some big changes are needed for the playoff format. We're not sure exactly when that's going to get announced, but I think it will be announced in the not so distant future what that playoff format is certainly going to be. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Philadelphia. Now, we talked about earlier today about the potential possibility of NASCAR racing in San Diego on the street course in 2026, and a deal is currently being finalized at this particular moment in point. However, there is a new market that NASCAR apparently is looking at for the not-so-distant future, and that is Philadelphia. According to a report from Adam Stern yesterday, NASCAR is considering a race in Philadelphia in the not-so-distant future. Now, it does need to be noted when a lot of people looked at the Philadelphia side of things, a lot of people were working at potentially another street course date and having another extra one on the schedule, despite the fact that NASCAR has talked about maybe potentially racing in Pittsburgh as early as 2027 or 2028. However, that is not what it seems like to be the case. According to the article, when you read the article, it sounds like that NASCAR could be targeting having a new stadium race on the schedule and racing at Franklin Field. Now, Philadelphia is an area of the country that is certainly interesting for a potential date. NASCAR, I think, really enjoyed the stadium concept. Of course, for 3 seasons, from 2022 or 2024, they race at the Los Angeles Coliseum. And all 3 years while they dropped in ratings, all 3 races, in my opinion, were really, really fun to watch, and it created that excitement. And I think NASCAR looked at that stadium concept and let it happen. And then this year, they race at Bowman Gray Stadium, which was the best stadium race of the 4 races we've seen. And we saw some fantastic racing, and we saw a pretty good finish at the end of the day as well, despite the fact that the next-gen car has had some issues when it comes to racing on short tracks. I think that the race was a really, really good show. And honestly, I get that people are talking about this like NASCAR's kind of talk about not racing in markets. And then you're also going to talk about the Pocono side of things in Philadelphia. Well, yes, Pocono is in the Philadelphia market. We got to realize this. Pennsylvania is actually a really, really big state, and it's like 2 hours away from Philadelphia. So while you are going to be affecting that market a little bit, you still can have 2 dates in the same part of the country and race them at different times. Now, obviously, you would have to race at a certain point. You couldn't have this race as the Clash, for example, right? You couldn't have that happen because it's going to be really cold. You all thought that the race at Bowman Gray was really cold. Well, Philadelphia is a lot colder in the winter than it is in Winston-Salem. It wasn't even super, super cold to begin with when the race happened. If you have a race at Franklin Field, it is going to be really cold. So my thing is if they're going to do this, I would have to think it is going to be an all-star race. Now, one thing about Philadelphia compared to racing at like LA, for example, it is a lot closer to North Carolina. It's still pretty far away, but it's not super, super far away. It would be like traveling a couple hours, kind of like down to Homestead Miami Speedway, for example. I think it is certainly interesting, though, that they are looking at this. I think racing in the Northeast especially, that is a market for IndyCar I think they need to tap into for sure. But NASCAR doesn't have 1,000% a fully tapped market on that front, and I think that is certainly an area that they really do need to look at in regards to expanding the sport long term. There's a lot of fans who are from the Pittsburgh area, from the Pennsylvania area, and I think expanding to different parts of the world is certainly interesting. We talk about the street course side of things. We're talking about going to like Cincinnati. We're talking about going to Pittsburgh. They're talking about going up to the Northwest. Philadelphia, I think if I'm not mistaken, is a pretty big market for NASCAR, and I think it does have a pretty big market share as well. Plus, it'd be very popular for people like Sage Karam to get a chance and opportunity. And I think it'd be pretty cool down the road, maybe like Nazareth got an opportunity to get rebuilt if you can't get that race at Philadelphia. But I think that it's really good to see that they are considering it at this point. I get people are worried about Pocono. I don't think Pocono will get affected if Philadelphia got added on the schedule, considering it wouldn't be on this. It would be, yes, a couple weeks after more than likely if you have it as an all-star event. But NASCAR wants to race in Philadelphia. They want to expand the schedule and go to more cities. They want to bring the racing to the racetracks. We are in a different day and age. I think rural areas are very important for NASCAR, don't get me wrong, but NASCAR is looking at the longer term deal, and they want to race in bigger cities to grow the sport. They want to balance it. They want to try new markets and try new things, while also balancing with old tracks like Rockingham and North Wilkesboro and Martinsville and Darlington, you name it. And Chicago and nowadays, consider it's almost 25 years old. They're trying to bring in North Wilkesboro too, Bowman Gray, all that. They're trying to have multiple ways of going with about things. And I think it is certainly interesting that they are looking ahead of the Philadelphia in the future. I don't think it's going to happen on next year's schedule, but 2027 is certainly likely, because NASCAR is talking about having a North Wilkesboro points paint event for next year. We'll keep an eye on that for sure. Nonetheless, certainly interesting stuff, and pretty wild to see that that is going on currently at the moment on what exactly is going to happen on that front. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Tab Boyd. Now, many of you have probably seen the penalty that Carson Hocevar received, not from NASCAR, but from Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports actually fined Carson Hocevar $50,000 for some comments he made during a live stream before headed out to the track of Mexico City. Talk about basically calling the place an S-hole, talk about how bad the city was and being a little scared of being in the city. Well, according to what was talked about by Freddie Kraft on Twitter, it sounded like there might be a spotter that might be getting in trouble and may have lost their job with an organization. As earlier today, it was listed by Breakcard on the roster portal, and Bob Parker so did it today as well, along with Joseph Strigley, that Todd Boyd is no longer listed as a spotter for Hyak Motorsports. And Clayton Hughes, who was a former spotter for Martin Truex Jr. and Michael McDowell, he will actually be taking over spotting duties for Todd Boyd starting this weekend with Hyak Motorsports. Now, it does need to be noted that Tab Boyd is still listed as a spotter currently at the moment for the number 66 car that Luke Baldwin is going to drive, and also, of course, he's been listed as a spotter for Ryan Ellis in the number 71 car for DGM Racing. So what this tells me is he was not suspended from NASCAR, but it seems like there was some internal discussions that happened with the Hyak Motorsports team and organization, and they've gone on to go ahead and fire Tab Boyd, or they've basically suspended him at least for the next couple weeks or so. There's still a chance and possibly that Tab Boyd is still with the organization. Now, why was Tab Boyd in a lot of trouble? Well, he kind of unfortunately badmouthed the city as a whole. Apparently, there was a story that surfaced where he put on his Twitter, though he did delete his Twitter, or X account, I should say, and basically talked about that he got robbed in the street as he left his hotel room. He got scammed and basically robbed, and basically said, screw this place. People call it a nice area. Air quotes, basically being sarcastic about it, and basically was criticizing the event in a really, really big way and wasn't the biggest fan of it. Now, there have been multiple stories that have come out from people that have been around the area that are basically saying that he went up to a scammer trying to exchange money, and you're not completely telling the truth. His wife has gone on a little bit of a Twitter rant recently, as many of you probably have seen, and been going off at a lot of people talking about some of the stuff. We don't know exactly what the truthful facts are. Some have said some things, and some have said other things at this point. Here's what I'll say about the situation here for Tab Boyd. I will say this. I think people should be allowed to express their opinion, or well, not express their opinion. You are allowed to express your opinion. If you feel really bad about an opinion, you can go ahead and say what you need to say. However, your actions can have consequences, and there's a big reason to look at this. You represent an organization, you represent a company, you represent a team. You're signed a contract where you are required to show respect, and you're not supposed to go out there and say really, really bad things. It's regardless of what position you're in, whether you're a driver, whether you are a spotter, whether you're a crew chief, it doesn't matter. If you say something really bad, it could affect your job. Like looking at a job, for example, at another company, if you work at a different company, for example, and you say something bad about the company you work for, or the boss for that matter, there's a chance you may get fired from that company because the bosses of these companies are looking at it very, very closely. And I think that with this event, I think there has been a lot of criticism and some disappointment that I've had with a lot of people complaining about it. I get people will say, well, people should be allowed to express their First Amendment rights. And I don't think there's any question that First Amendment rights are very, very important. But at the same token and same time, If you work for a company like Hyak Motorsports, if you work for a company that is involved in the sport, you have the responsibility to showing respect and not going off. Sometimes the best thing to do is not say anything at all, even if it's true or not, because we don't know what exactly the facts are there. So the question is this a 1 week deal where he's out, or is he completely fired? I have to think he's fired altogether at this point. The fact that people are talking about that it sounds like he might be gone altogether, at least from Hyak, that is certainly interesting. Now, Tad Boyd has had a long-term history with the sport. He was a spotter for Juan Montoya in the early 2010s. He also was a spotter for Joey Logano when he, of course, went over to Team Penske around the middle 2010s, I'm pretty sure. And then, of course, he was a spotter for William Byron before working with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I think that sometimes the smartest thing that people can do is just not say anything at all. When you work for a company, when you work for a team, you have the responsibility as an individual to show respect. And I get that some people do have bad experiences. And I would have to think that there might have been a bad experience that was experienced by Tad Boyd. And I think that it's certainly possible that whatever happened is really true. However, you do represent a company, you do represent a team, and you do represent the sport. And I think that what happened here is very important to happen. And maybe losing his job might have been a little bit overkill. I would have honestly, if I was Hyak Motorsports, if they fired him altogether, I think that's being a little bit overkill. If you wanted to suspend and fire, they did that. That's their decision. NASCAR did not get involved in this one. They didn't really get involved with the Carson Hocevar one either. They were paying attention to it, but they weren't fully getting involved in the Carson Hocevar stuff. It seems like that this is kind of similar to that, where there might have been a fine. I'm not sure at this point, but it seemed like Hyak may have not been happy, and maybe there was some industry pressure. We're probably going to find out the story in the future on exactly everything that happened. Some have said, like Corey LaJoie, that what exactly happened may have not been fully accurate from Tad Boyd, while others are saying what Tad Boyd saying is true. So we'll see what happens and when that story does come out. But as of right now, it seems like Tad Boyd is no longer the spotter at this moment. Clayton Hughes, I think, will do a good job as a spotter for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. We may hear stage winner Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Just a reminder that he's kind of sometimes egged on these drivers. So just saying, Carson Hocevar, you might want to watch out for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. considering Clayton Hughes' history. Nonetheless, interesting move to see Clayton Hughes come back and be a spotter. He's had a lot of success as a spotter, and it's interesting that Tad Boyd is no longer the spotter for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. currently at the moment in Cup. We'll probably get the story very soon on the front on exactly what happened down in Mexico City. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Dodge. Now, obviously we know that Ram, which is part of the Dodge and the Stellantis program, will be returning to NASCAR competition in 2026 in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Now, Tim Kuklanis, who owns Ram and is part of the Stellantis program, is taken back as CEO and president of the company, was on the Happy Harvick podcast earlier today and addressed some really important things in regards to Dodge. Now, apparently in the negotiations for Dodge returning to NASCAR competition, they were actually in deep talks of actually going back to the Cup Series, I believe as early as 2026, but those talks kind of stalled a little bit when he found out about the charters, which is interesting to me that they didn't find out anything about the charter stuff, which I think it's both things. One, NASCAR probably should have told them, oh, by the way, we have charters, so you got to pay attention to that if you're going to be joining the Cup Series in the future. But also, a little interesting, they didn't know about the charter system, considering that the charter system was being talked about in 2022, and we've had the charters now for almost a decade at this point. Next year is going to be a 10-year anniversary of the charters being involved in the sport. Now, we also talked a little bit about some other stuff in regards to Ram on what they're looking at. It sounds like they're going to have around 4 to 6 trucks out there in 2026. They did not reveal any teams that have signed with the program currently at the moment, but I'm not exactly sure who's going to go over there. One name that we've heard has been a potential possibility that might be going over there is Cletus McFarland. Now, Tim Kuklanis went on and talked a little bit about this, and he basically kind of confirmed that it is not exactly true that he is going over there. He says he's had one conversation with Cletus McFarland. He's a really nice guy, that's what he said, but there's no official confirmation that Cletus McFarland is going to Ram. That is very interesting. Now, obviously, we've heard rumors that he might be getting involved in the Truck Series next year. It might be moving up. Also, Kevin kind of talked about maybe Tony Stewart getting involved, and I think Tim has said that that is not happening, which makes a lot of sense. I don't really know why there's talk about Tony Stewart coming back to NASCAR really at this point. Tony really has no interest. He's having success in the NHRA, and Tony has stated publicly as well he doesn't really have interest in helping Dodge. He stated that publicly a couple months back, I'm pretty sure, so I don't think that is going to be a possibility. possibility. Now, my question is, with the truck program, who is going to end up going over there? There's been rumors of Rhett Jones Racing and Cletus being involved in that, but I'm not sure. There's been talks according to Adam Stern, but there's nothing official on that. We've heard Nice Motorsports mentioned as a possibility. Nice would make the most sense at this point. I've heard CR7 Motorsports might be a possibility, and they keep kind of teasing it out with these announcement things that they're doing, but I'm not sure if CR7 is going to go over there. They make a lot of logical sense, and I think that you'd be looking at GMS Racing as well. GMS Racing, which has not been in the truck series in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talks and speculation that they may potentially be coming in and joining up with their truck program and maybe having a truck program once again in 2026. I'm very interested to see who's going to be part of those programs. But let's talk about the Cup Series, because that's the main thing you've clicked on this video for. According to Tim Kuklinis and what Bob Pockers mentioned today as well, it sounds like that Dodge is hoping to be in the Cup Series as early as 2027, and they have pretty big ambitions to have a Cup Series program in 2027. However, a lot of his advisors that are very close to the team and organization are trying to push him to not have a program till 2028. Logically, the easiest thing that they could do is wait a couple extra years and wait till 2028 to have a program. But I think Dodge is going to be very, very pushy to get a program in for as early as 2027. They, of course, have had a lot of success in NASCAR over the years, and they won a championship in 2012. They came back for about 12 years in 2001 of the 2012 season. They won a lot of races with drivers like Sterling Marlin. I believe Bobby Hamilton almost got a win for the organizations, for some of the organizations that he drove for that programs. We saw drivers like Bill Elliott win. We've seen drivers from the Chip Ganassi side like Jay McMurray go on and pick up a win or two. We've seen drivers like Casey Mears compete for them. Casey Kane had a lot of success. Ryan Newman had the majority of success with Dodge. And they've had a lot of success with drivers in teams like Chip Ganassi Racing, also Team Penske for many, many years, the last team to win a championship for Dodge. And they were going to have a body for 2013. Apparently, Matt Kenseth was going to go over there. And we know Andretti was likely going to have a program for 2013 with Dodge. That's why Kurt Busch ended up driving for Andretti at the Indy 500 2014, was because that deal was supposed to happen. But, of course, that did not end up happening. I believe Matt Kenseth was also part of the rumored program over there as well for 2013. So the big question we ask is, if they do go Cup racing in 2027, what will happen with charters? Well, obviously, I think you see a few charters added. NASCAR stated publicly they could add up to 4 potential charters with the new manufacturer coming in. So they would have to definitely expand the field if they are going to have 4 charters. But they're also going to have to basically let some teams that have already bought it. That would mean that if those charters come in, we would see up to 40 charters altogether in the sport. The other big question is, what teams could switch over to Dodge? Well, there's been rumblings and a lot of talk, and apparently according to what Jordan Bianchi's mentioned recently, Trackhouse would be the odds-on favorite to switch over to Dodge. Trackhouse is the one that makes the most logical sense to me. Number one, you look at the big top-tier teams. Trackhouse, while yes, they've gotten 2 wins so far this year, one with Ross Chastain and one with Shane Van Gisbergen, and they're probably going to win more races with both those guys this season. They're not at the level they were in 2022. Ross Chastain got 2 wins that season, and Ross was a championship contender that year. Since that time, the team has kind of regressed a little bit, and they haven't had the same consistent pace and speed. So I think Trackhouse would be the most logical to make the move over to Dodge. And that would mean maybe like Zilich would be affected by the Junior Motorsports stuff. I had a theory that if Junior Motorsports wanted to go Cup racing, maybe they do it with Zilich up there and with the Trackhouse branding. But I think that is certainly a possibility with Trackhouse. I think Trackhouse is the most likely at this point. None of their drivers are fully under the Chevy contract at this time. And I think that we would see Trackhouse come back. It'd be a really big deal. Or not Trackhouse, Dodge come back to that program. Some have suggested Legacy Motor Club, and while Legacy Motor Club would make a lot of sense, I don't think they're planning, to my understanding, switch. Now, if GMS Racing does switch over, maybe that's a possibility, with Maury Gallagher still having very small involvement in the Legacy Motor Club team. I think that would be the one to watch out for as well with Legacy. They're a team, though, that wants to stay with Toyota, to my understanding, so I don't think they're going to be leaving their Toyota contract anytime soon or anytime in the future. I think Kaulig Racing is another one to look at. Kaulig Racing is a team that, while this year they've shown improvement compared to last year, they're still definitely behind a little bit. So I think that's a team to watch out for that could potentially switch over. And I think maybe even RFK long term, when Jack unfortunately has what happens to him, potentially that team. But I don't know if RFK would be a possibility. I think Trackhouse is the most likely. And maybe we see another organization come in, and maybe this could lead Cletus to going Cup racing down the road in 2027 or 28. I mean, Cletus said he wants to have a run of Daytona Daytona 500 in the next couple of years, so maybe that is certainly a possibility. I'm interested to see who kind of joins these programs. Dana White's name has been linked to a potential Ram program, so I'm very intrigued to see what happens with Dodge and when they do go Cup Series racing, but I think there's a very likely possibility that we're going to see them in the Cup Series potentially in 2027 and maybe 2028 as well. It's going to be interesting to follow this story and see what happens in regards to that, but I think you may see Dodge in the NASCAR Cup Series very, very soon, as early as 27. It'd be a fourth manufacturer. We know Honda's interested as well, so we could have as many as 5 manufacturers in NASCAR by as early as 2029 or 28, and be certainly interesting with them maybe leaving IndyCar very, very soon. So that is going to today's Law NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What thoughts about Tabloid no longer being a spotter at Hyak right now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Dodge potentially having a Cup Series program as early as 27? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have the Truck Series race review from Pocono Raceway. Tomorrow, we're going to have reactions to the NASCAR Xfinity Series race in Pocono, and we're going to have this reactions to Cup qualifying from Pocono. And then on Sunday, we're going to have the starting lineup video for the Cup race at Pocono. And then, of course, we'll have the race review, the final race, of course, for Amazon Prime, with people like Carl Edwards being there, Corey LaJoie, Dale Jr., Steve Vittar, Daniel Trotta, Kim Kuhn, Trevor Bayne, all of them. We're going to have content coming up. People, Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Skirbush, Cobblish, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, of the loss between 2011 and Front Row Motorsports, Shaw the Crate, Sam Mayer, Cleese McFarland, Carson Quaffle, Junior Motorsports, all the good stuff we'll be talking about on the channel in the coming days, weeks, along with Kyle Busch as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.